Namaha. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Want to receive the blessing of Radha Madhava, Radha Shyam Sundar, Krishna Balaram, Bal Gopal, Nrsimhadev, Jagannath, Baladev, Gaunitai, Tulsimani, Haridas Thakur, Guru Parampara, Srila Prabhupada, Guru Maharaj, and the assembled devotees. So, continuing on, Srimad Bhagavatam, we're on chapter 20 of the 11th canto, which is entitled The Pure Devotional Service Surpasses Knowledge and Detachment. So Bhakti Yoga is topmost. The processes of Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga are explained in this chapter in terms of the presence of different good and bad qualities in particular candidates. So Uddhav asks Krishna. So this is all about questions by Uddhav to Krishna. The Vedic Shastras are the words expressing the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In these Vedic scriptures is found an outlook of duality based on such concepts as the Varnashram system. And at the same time, the Vedas reject this dualistic vision. So, the outlook on duality talks about living within the Varnashram system, where you have this concept of good and bad and hot and cold and happiness, unhappiness. But at the same time, this is rejected. This duality is rejected by the Vedas. My dear Lord, the distinction observed between piety and sin comes from your own Vedic knowledge and does not arise by itself. If the same Vedic literature subsequently nullifies such a distinction between piety and sin, there will certainly be confusion. Yes, on one hand, you're saying, we need to abide by good and bad, but on the other side, you're saying, ignore dualities. So isn't that going to confuse everybody? Uddhav, desiring to understand the reason why the scriptures contain such conflicting ideas and how these might be reconciled, inquired from Lord Krishna about this matter. In response, the Supreme Lord replied that because he desired, that Krishna desired, that human beings may achieve perfection, he has presented three paths of advancement: path of knowledge, path of work, path of devotion. Besides these three, there are absolutely no other means of elevation. So, why the dualities are prescribed or talked about in the Vedas? Well, also there are different types of individuals who have different levels of consciousness. So in order to bring those personalities into the Vedic system, the duality of good and bad is introduced. Otherwise, how will one make progress? And what Krishna is explaining here is there are three paths of progress: knowledge, work, devotion. So let's have a look at those. Three parts as follows. Karma Yoga is designated for those persons who are not detached, who are full of gross desires. So Karma Yoga is basically where you do your action and you offer some fruits to the Lord. Karma Yoga. So you're not detached from doing the actions or the material world. You have loads of desires, but you are using the fruits to serve the Lord. Jnana Yoga is for those who are detached from the fruits of activity and have given up material endeavors. So they don't want to necessarily interact with this world, right? They're detached, and they've given up material endeavors, but they haven't quite connected yet with the Lord. Bhakti Yoga is for those who have taken to the principles of Yukta Vairagya, appropriate renunciation. Yukta Vairagya is basically renunciation, Vairagya, but it's done with a view to pleasing the Supreme Lord. Appropriate renunciation. Okay. As long as one is interested in enjoying the fruits of one's work, or as long as one's faith in the topics of discussion of the Supreme Lord and the path of devotional service has not awakened, so bhakti has not arisen yet, then one must continue to fulfill all prescribed duties of his karma, right? Which means if we are born in a certain body, we have to fulfill the duties that arise of that body. And for example, Arjun's body was that of a Kshatriya. So he had to continue to fulfill the duties imposed upon him as a Kshatriya. But neither the renunciate nor the devotee of the Supreme Lord need carry out ritualistic duties, right? So this is the renunciate, the Jnana Yogi or the Bhakti Yogi. They don't have to continue ritualistic duties. Persons who follow their own duty, who abandon that which is forbidden, and who are free from greed and other unhealthy characteristics, attain either monastic knowledge or else, if they are fortunate, devotion to the Supreme Lord. Such knowledge and devotion can be achieved in the human form of life, which is therefore a desirable object both for those living in hell and for the demigods. Thus, a human being who is wise should never desire promotion to the heavenly planets, nor desire permanent residence on earth. So this is another reason why we are so fortunate, right? Really, only in the human form of life can we perform bhakti. Can't do it in the animal form of life, can't do it in the demigod form of life, because in the heavens there's too much enjoyment. They are distracted from doing bhakti because of that enjoyment, that mood to always be having, great sense pleasure. So even the demigods, they aspire to take birth on earth, especially at this time of Kali Yuga, because the process is so easy to connect with God and attain the supreme spiritual planet, world. Knowing that one's duration of life is reduced by the passing of days and nights, one should be shaken by fear. In this way, giving up all material attachment and desire, and try to understand the Supreme Lord, achieving perfect peace. The human body is like a boat. Sri Gurudev is the helmsman, and the mercy of the Supreme Lord is the favorable breeze. If the person who has attained such a rare boat in the form of a human body does not desire to cross over the ocean of material existence, he is in fact the killer of the soul. Why is he the killer? The soul can't be killed. This is what Krishna tells us in the Bhagavad Gita, second chapter, from verses 12 onwards, for about 30 verses. No, 18 verses. But the point Krishna is making here is that if one has a human form of life and one is not inclined towards spirituality and is enjoying the senses, living a life full of gratification, then that person is gliding down into lower species of life. And thus he becomes the killer of the soul, because he is undermining the consciousness of the soul, making that soul go worse and becoming more and more degraded in this material world. This is why he's called the killer of the soul. The mind is fickle, but one should not indifferently allow it to act as it will. Yeah, mind is crazy, as we know, right? We all know this. The mind can tell us to do things which are not good for us, and we'll do it because we don't, we allow it to act as it will. Rather, one should conquer the senses and the vital air, and by intelligence endowed with the qualities of goodness should bring the mind under control. So this is the work the soul has to do through intelligence. So intelligence is something that we've been given by the Lord. You can use it to control the mind. An expert horseman desiring to tame a headstrong horse first lets the horse have his way for a moment and then pulls the reins, gradually places the horse under the desired path. Similarly, this supreme yoga process is that by which one carefully observes the movements and desires of the mind and gradually brings them under full control. So this is a very nice example Lord Krishna is giving to Uddhav. One who has a sense of detachment and renunciation can give up false identification with the body and other sense objects by constantly studying the instructions of his spiritual master. By the yoga practice of yama and niyama, which Krishna talked about yesterday, etc., focusing on the Lord. So this is quite important. If one has that sense of detachment, doesn't need to enjoy his senses, and is renounced, he can walk away, then he's in a very good position, very strong position. If because of momentary attention, a yogi accidentally commits an abominable activity, then by the very practice of yoga, he should burn to ashes the sinful reaction. So sometimes mistakes can happen. For us, it's probably on a daily basis. But with sincerity, we have to try to remedy those mistakes through practice of yoga, bhakti yoga. My devotee who sincerely desiring to give up sense gratification, knowing that it leads to misery, but still unable to renounce all sense enjoyment, should remain happy and worship me with great faith and conviction. We should not get depressed if somehow we do something which is against the principles of bhakti, right? Of course, it's not a moment of happiness necessarily, but we should remember we are still on the path of achieving the Supreme Lord. And because we're on that path, we remain confident, we remain happy, we remain fixed in our conviction that yes, I will attain the Supreme Lord. Yes, maybe now and then I go a little crazy, but I am not going to waver. Even though he is sometimes engaged in sense enjoyment, my devotee knows that all sense gratification leads to a miserable result, and he sincerely repents such activities. Anyone who renders service to the Supreme Lord by constant devotional service will be able to steadily fix his mind upon the Supreme Lord. And thus, all desires for sense gratification sitting within the heart will be destroyed to the root. It will happen. It's a question of endeavor and time. And of course, the mercy of the Supreme Lord. When one directly perceives the presence of the Supreme Lord, his false ego becomes completely eradicated. Everything, all of our problems tend to arise from this false ego, false ego body. We're identifying with the body, and we have some pride, arising from our situation. All of his doubts are shattered, right? When one directly perceives the presence of the Supreme Lord, the false ego is eradicated, doubts are shattered, heaps of material activities become diminished to nil. For this reason, the devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead do not consider knowledge and renunciation to be the means for achieving the highest benefit. No, knowledge is good, renunciation is good, but it's not enough. It's not going to give us the Supreme Lord or the Supreme Destination, because we need to engage in the service of the Lord through bhakti. That's what's going to do it. Everything can be achieved by fruitive activities, penance, knowledge, detachment, mystic yoga, charities, religious duties, and all other means of perfecting life is easily achieved by the devotee through loving service unto the Lord. That's all we need to do. Through a little bit of love, prema, we can achieve the highest perfection. If somehow a devotee desires promotion to heaven, liberation, or residence in the Lord's abode, he easily achieves such benedictions. Because the Lord's devotees possess saintly behavior and deep intelligence, they completely dedicate themselves to Him, to Krishna. Do not desire anything besides the Lord. Indeed, even if they are offered liberation from birth and death, they do not accept it. They just want to serve the Lord. They don't want anything from the Lord. They don't want anything from anyone because they are so fixed in their seva to the Lord. They're just totally and utterly focused. Complete detachment is said to be the highest stage of freedom. And for one who has no personal desire, pursues personal rewards, can achieve loving devotional service unto the Lord. Material piety and sin, which arise from the good and evil of this world, cannot exist within the devotees who, being free from material hankering, maintain steady spiritual consciousness in all circumstances. Indeed, such devotees have achieved the Supreme Lord, who is beyond anything that can be conceived by material intelligence. Persons who seriously follow these methods of achieving the Lord attain freedom from illusion, and upon reaching his personal abode, they perfectly understand the absolute truth. This chapter is such a wonderful chapter because Krishna is just giving the glories of bhakti yoga and how it transcends karma yoga, jnana yoga, and it takes us to the supreme destination. Even if the devotee has no desire to attain the Lord, it doesn't matter. And the devotee, he has no desire to attain the Lord. He just has love for the Lord. And of course, the Lord will give him everything. Chapter 21. Lord Krishna is entitled Lord Krishna's explanation of the Vedic path. There are persons who there are persons who are unfit for all three forms of yoga. Okay, karma, jnana, bhakti. They are inimical to Krishna. They're against Krishna, attached to sense gratification, are dominated by fruitive activities aimed at fulfillment of material desires. This chapter describes their faults in the terms of place, time, substance, and beneficiary of action. So, Krishna said, for those who are perfect in knowledge and devotion to the Lord, there are no materially good qualities or faults. They're neutral. Those who give up these methods for achieving me, like bhakti, and instead being moved by material senses, cultivate insignificant sense gratification, certainly undergo the continuous cycle of material existence, samsara, birth and death. For those who are inimical to spiritual life, who are devoted to fruitive work for fulfillment of lusty desires, in order to understand what is proper in life, one must consider purity and impurity, and distinguish between good and bad. And to ensure one's physical survival, one must recognize that which is auspicious and inauspicious. Mm, mm. So those who are anti-God, effectively, they are in a pretty terrible position. Because this world of duality impacts them hugely. What is good or bad? They have to distinguish. What is auspicious and inauspicious? Whereas those who are performing bhakti, they're simply acting in love for the Supreme Lord. Whether it's good or bad, it makes no difference because they are simply engaged in serving the Lord. The consideration of purity and impurity and auspiciousness and inauspicious are made in terms of the place of activity, the time, the objects utilized, the performer, the mantras chanted in a particular activity. So what are these things? These are 6 factors. Place, time, etc. are purified. Then there is dharma or virtue. Otherwise, there is adharma or fault. So what are these 6 factors? What are they specifically? The place. Purity and impurity are distinguished by such facts as the presence of black deer, where cleanliness and purificatory rites are neglected, where meat eaters are prominent, or where the earth is barren, are all considered to be contaminated lands. Interesting. Nowadays, we can see the prominence of meat eaters. Of course, vegetarianism is on the rise, but it is quite shocking when we go, for example, even to Bharat, we see so many people wanting to eat meat. Place of the land of Krishna, the land of Gomata, the land of vegetarianism, but so much desire to eat meat. Time, second factor. There are distinctions of purity and impurity, either in terms of time itself or in terms of its specific relation with various objects for the performance of one's prescribed duties. That time which impedes the performance of one's duty is considered impure. Object. An object's purity or impurity is established by application of another object, by words, by rituals, by the effects of time, or according to relative magnitude. Various objects such as grains, wooden utensils, things made of bone, thread, liquids, objects derived from fire, skins, earthly objects are all purified by time, by the wind, by fire, by earth, by water, either separately or in combination. So we looked at place, time. Time depends on, auspicious, inauspiciousness. An object, such as grains and wooden utensils. Again, these are all factors that are to be considered in terms of purity and impurity. Performers. The performers can be cleansed by bathing, charity, austerity, age, personal strength, purificatory rituals, prescribed duties, and above all, by remembrance of the Lord. Mantras. When one's knowledge of mantras is received from the lips of a bona fide spiritual master, one's mantra is considered pure, and one's work is purified by offering it unto the Supreme Lord. Sometimes we see a lot of people chanting the Gayatri mantra, but the Gayatri mantra is a mantra that's given by a spiritual master. It's a secret mantra, in fact, not to be chanted out loud. But nowadays, it's very common practice to hear the mantras being chanted out loud. So just wondering this time and circumstance. And the last bit, the particular activity, is actually missing the number 6 from this. Anyway, the Lord explains here that material piety and sin are always relative considerations as they are transformed according to place, time, beneficiary, and so on. For example, one who abandons one's wife and children is certainly irresponsible and thoughtless. However, if one takes sannyas and remains fixed on a higher spiritual platform, he is considered to be a most saintly person. So this is a really interesting point. If you abandon the wife and child, then you're considered a sinful person, unless you're a sannyasi. You've taken sannyas and you have maintained your position as sannyasi. This is very important. If one takes to sannyas and then falls down, then you're irresponsible, thoughtless. Otherwise, you're considered a saintly person. Piety and sin therefore depend upon particular circumstances and are at times difficult to distinguish. So this is an example of where something looks bad, but actually is good, potentially. One who accepts material sensory objects as desirable becomes attached to them. From such attachment, lust arises, and from lust creates quarrel amongst men, and from quarrel arises intolerable anger, followed by darkness of ignorance. This ignorance overtakes a man's broad intelligence. So this is a very similar verse in the Srimad, in the Bhagavad Gita, second chapter. I think it's verse 62, where Krishna talks about how the fall down of the person. You know, first you look at the object, you get attached to enjoying that object, and then all of this arises. You get attached to that object, lust comes, and then lust, from lust, because you can't satisfy your lust, anger, and then from anger we go into ignorance. A person bereft of real intelligence is considered to have lost everything. And he says that in that verse as well. Deviated from the actual purpose of his life, he becomes dull, just like a dead person, cannot recognize himself or others, living uselessly. Work performed for sense gratification is not beneficial. The descriptions of fruitive benefits offered, which are like promises of candy offered to a child to take medicine. In various phalastutis are actually meant to help one gradually cultivate a taste for the higher benefit. This is what the Vedas does. It does give you a little carrot or little candy to entice you to reach for higher purposes. But persons of inferior intelligence take the flowery benedictory verses of the scriptures to be actual purpose of the Vedas. This is where one can get very badly misled. But persons of inferior intelligence take the flowery, I've done that promise material rewards, promotion to heaven, to be the actual purpose of Vedas, not understanding the actual purpose of Vedic knowledge. Due to lust, anger, and greed, they mistake mere flowers to be actual fruits of life. Taking pleasure in violence, they cruelly slaughter innocent animals in sacrifice for their own sense gratification, and thus worship demigods, forefathers, etc. Such passion for violence, however, is never encouraged within the process of Vedic sacrifice. Those established in material passion, goodness, and ignorance worship the particular demigods and other deities headed by Indra, who manifest the same modes of passion, ignorance, goodness, and ignorance. The worshipper of demigods think, we shall worship the demigod in this life. By our sacrifice, we shall go to heaven and enjoy. When that enjoyment is finished, we shall return to this world and take birth as great householders in aristocratic families. The problem with that is, you're still in this material world, in samsara, birth and death. And because one is born in a very good family, one becomes very proud and arrogant. And eventually that will lead to becoming degraded in our consciousness. And then the next life will be in lower species. And then you are, as Krishna says earlier, you're a killer of the soul. The Vedas ultimately reveal the living entity as pure spirit soul. The transcendental sound of the Vedas is very difficult to comprehend and manifests on different levels within the prana, senses, and mind. This Vedic sound is unlimited, very deep, and unfathomable, just like the ocean. This is such a nice comments here. So, the Lord personally established the Vedic sound vibration in the form of Omkar within all living entities. This Om, very important. It is thus perceived subtly. The Vedic sound branches out in thousands of directions, adorned with different letters, expanded from the syllable Om, the consonants, the vowels, etc. The Ved is then elaborated by many verbal varieties expressed in different meters. The Vedic meters are Gayatri, Ushnik, Anushtup, Brihati, Pankti, Trishtup, Jagati, Atichanda, Atyasti, Ati Jagati, Ati Virat. Only the Lord actually understands the confidential purpose of Vedic knowledge. Thus, no one knows what the Vedas are actually prescribing in the ritualistic injunctions of the Karma Kand. No object is being indicated in the formulas of worship found in the Upasana Kanda, or discussed through the various hypotheses in the Jnana Kanda section of the Vedas. And then Krishna is giving. Krishna is a ritualistic sacrifice enjoyed by the Vedas. He is the worshipable deity. It is I, as Krishna, who am present as various philosophical hypotheses. And it is I, Krishna alone, who am thus then refuted by philosophical analysis. The transcendental sound vibration thus establishes him as the essential meaning of all Vedic knowledge. The Vedas elaborately analyzing all material duality as nothing but his illusory potency. So this is an interesting chapter. Chapter number 21 talks about the Vedas and how within the Vedas this is quite a complex area of knowledge. Any questions? Any comments? Okay, we can stop there. Srimad Bhagavad Purana ki Jai, Shri Krishna Chandra Bhagavan ki